there's a pedigree in there which shows you that they're not that interested in the kind of like the hype and the swing trading and all that kind of stuff. It's just
Yeah.
about building. Certainly
And
the market coming up is a I think that one of the big things with the ETF approval shows that maybe the governments of the world are going to be stop being as cavalier as they have been with regulation up till now, because it's been
yeah.
the manipulation. The signs of manipulation are pretty clear in this space. So avoiding that and as a builder is a key part.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I feel with the halving coming up, as well as with the recent approval of the ETFs, it is looking up. Moreover, it does give you a little idea about how governments are perhaps thinking about this entire space. And as you said, they can no longer be, cavalier in their attitude towards creating perhaps robust regulations, or any kind of basically a mechanism, a system for the builders who are working in this space, to give them a little more support. So that is good, and I totally concur. I think entrepreneurs should be building in bear as well as bull market. Bull market is when you really go out and sell, and bear is when you keep your head down and try to build something that will really solve for your potential user in some way and add value in their lives, which is what gives these platforms or any kind of a network you're building its stickiness.
Absolutely.
So in terms of just the outlook that you have towards the market, we've talked about the government and the ETF coming in, and how the builder should respond. What according to you and personally, what do you feel, which niches would really work out very well, or will be the ones to pull out the market from the bear that we have currently into a good bull run? Are there any niches that you are betting on?
I don't know if I mean I'm not the person to talk to you about kind of like trading and stuff like that. That's not my forte. I think I've seen a lot of there's been a lot of talk about layer twos
Hmm.
in recent history, and I feel like, despite the fact that their existence kind of talks, demonstrates the flaws in some of the layer ones that are out there. I feel like there's a lot of really, really interesting things happening in the layer two space, in kind of optimism and all those guys. So they're a really interesting space. And I think one of the things about that is because when you see what people are building on them, you kind of see what people wish they could do on a layer one.
Hmm.
There's a lot of interesting gaming applications. I feel like, despite the fact that we've seen a lot of GameFi go on and not really very many long-term successes in the GameFi world, gaming is a massive industry. I think it's the biggest in the world. And I feel like if the Web3 world was able to kind of move towards the gaming industry in a sensible manner and provide them with a platform that they could use to develop on, that would be a very, very powerful use case. Now, that would require interoperability to be able to communicate with legacy systems. It would
Hmm.
require the ability to move data around on chain, and it would require the ability to execute robust contracts. Like, these are not just sort of changing balances in a wallet. These would be actual computational contracts that would need to happen. So a blockchain that is able to address that would really be able to hit the gaming world, and provide value to it. So gaming is certainly something that's very interesting as well.
Yeah, it's very promising, I think, and it's one of the spaces that has kind of done well, despite the market behaving the way it is, or the capital market not having enough liquidity. Because it's an actual real use case, I think. The users for users to be able to play these games, and the play to earn was big at some point, but not so much. But nevertheless, gaming, I think, there are so many DAOs, and they are doing wonderfully well in this space. And this particular niche is very, very exciting, and I concur there as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, because you mentioned interoperability, I would love to ask you, how is Gorki Network potentially, and right now, obviously, I know it's still early days, and you guys are in your DevNet, but how are you guys approaching interoperability? Are you looking at, because you mentioned that you are ultimately chain agnostic. How does that really work, or how will it work in the long term?
Well, so one of the things and use cases that we've talked about is this concept that, other chains could operate as a shard of our system.
Right.
Having a very powerful virtual machine is a very is very useful for us because we can implement functionality in our smart contracts that can maybe call other other chains directly through it from the smart contract. You could include, a bash script or some kind of jar file that can contact a database or, communicate directly to a Web3 portal and then talk to another blockchain directly from a smart contract. If you have a powerful smart contract engine, these are things that you can do. So you can almost, if you think about like what a bridge is for cryptocurrencies, there's this kind of quite complex dance of moving, tokens into a particular wallet and locking them, and then telling the other blockchain that they've been locked, and then minting tokens on the other blockchain. But these things are traditionally quite vulnerable, and we've obviously everyone's seen these hacks that happen, and people lose a lot of money. But if you're able to do these kind of communications straight from the smart contract, and they happen before there's any chance to have any kind of attack, or they're done through a mechanism that is, would detect if there was a problem, like a consensus protocol, for example, then you have very, very powerful use cases there. So interoperability, what we're talking about when we talk about interoperability is really tight integration into smart contract execution for other systems and other blockchains potentially.
Okay. And can you tell me whether, these blockchains, if they want to become like a shard on your network, do they have to be EVM compatible, or are you agnostic there as well?
Yeah, so we're not using the EVM. I mean, the virtual machine that we're building is far more powerful than that. So that's why we're building it. But we wouldn't have any constraints over what happens on their blockchain to have them interoperate with us or integrate with us. That would be, as long as they can kind of communicate with us and provide the information that is necessary for whatever kind of integration they would like to achieve, then yeah, we have no kind of constraint in that sense.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. So, can you tell me a little bit more about, apart from your test net, is there any other bigger milestone that you're waiting to hit as a team?
So we are just about to kick into a funding round with a large group of investors. I'm not going to say who, unfortunately, until we can kind of close it. But over the next 2 weeks, that's we're going to be building some more funds, which is very exciting. And hopefully, yeah, we've got another couple of groups that we are in the process of talking to, and yeah, we're hoping to make some announcements over the next couple of weeks about how that's going and close that process off. So things are looking up in that sense.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful to know. And we'll all wait for your big announcement to come through. I think what you guys are building sounds really exciting, like I mentioned before. Can you tell us a little bit more about the team behind Gorki Network?
Yeah, I think so. We have self and we've been working. My brother actually, John, has been working pretty tirelessly over the past couple of months to build the kind of structure of the project. The ethos behind the project is that it is open source, and we're building an open source technology, and we want to build a kind of a community governed system that is not owned by any kind of one entity. This sort of concept of decentralization really runs to the core. So we can try to put in place the sort of nonprofits and organizations that will run the project, and then hopefully hand it off to the community, as a DAO or something in the future. The core developer is Anton, has been working very hard with in terms of building the consensus protocol with Dennis. They're two very talented. I think you can kind of call them mathematicians, really, the kind of stuff that they do, and computer scientists or logisticians. I don't know how you pronounce that. And then one of our lead developer, Tomislav, is a very, very experienced guy in terms of architecture and system design. And it's a real privilege to work with him to kind of see how he puts these applications and Web3 sort of strategies together. And another one of our other more talented developers as well, Stas. He's He's been working very hard. He's kind of a workhorse within the team. I think people, you get staff a project and it gets done kind of thing. So he's a very talented developer. They're building using kind of very modern software architecture, and it's as a more traditional software developer from the sort of C++ world, and even actually some sort of Fortran 77, unfortunately. I find a lot of these newer kind of technologies quite difficult to get hold of. But my own preference is to move towards Rust, but we're not quite there yet. So we'll see.
Okay, all right. That's wonderful. Then now, again, taking a step back from Gorky, we can maneuver it again there. Tell me a little about what do you think seems to be working, according to you, in the space in Web3 currently, and what do you think is definitely not working? And this is like your general observation that you had so far. And if there are certain things that you think are definitely not working or they're not going to work as we move forward in this ecosystem, what can be done to fix it or change it?
What seems to be working is I think people are moving towards building real stuff with blockchain, and there's a lot of people out there who are talking the right talk, in my opinion. If you look at what the ICP guys talk about, the Dfinity guys, and this sort of concept of putting real calculation and doing real stuff in a distributed manner, that message is very powerful. The Agoric guys have got a fantastic kind of approach to I think what they call is orchestration, and I really think that is a critical part of this. If we kind of move into the future, I don't necessarily see that there is like one chain to rule them all. I really think there is space out there for a lot of chains, and their particular use cases and communities to be used. Some of the things I don't see working. There are some chains that sort of try and close things off, and there are some chains that kind of focus entirely on business and have tried to sort of be permissioned. I think the permissioned part of the blockchain space is not necessarily viable, in my opinion. It's kind of it's the antithesis of what we're trying to build here, to have a permissioned decentralized system, in my opinion. And I think some of the things that are not working in general in the space are some of the metrics that everyone is using. So, for example, claiming that you can do 1 billion transactions a second or whatever you want is ludicrous if that transaction is merely changing the state of a bit in memory somewhere, because that's not a valuable transaction. That is a simple change of a piece of information. Like, a valuable transaction is something that does something. It communicates with a system, or it computes something real, and then eventually moves some real data around. So what I feel like it needs to happen is a little bit of maturity in the space in terms of the metrics that we use to apply to some of these blockchains, and say, okay, can this blockchain actually do what's needed, or is it just claiming to be, doing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of transactions a second, but those transactions have limited scope to provide value for the real world?
Yeah, I think that is like absolutely hitting the nail on the head. I think that's very, very true. A lot of these layers, they claim to be able to process X, Y, Z number of transactions. But again, as you said, where is the pie, right? There's got to be some meat in it. So yeah, it that definitely doesn't work. And moreover, what you said about permission blockchains is something I feel very, very strongly about as well, because ultimately, when you're working and building in the decentralized space, it somehow seems to be completely at odds with the very ethos of decentralization.
Definitely.
Keeping in mind, again, just like talking about decentralization, and I'm aware that we are running a little short now, and we're coming close to the time we'll have to sort of wrap this up. But I do want to ask you, how do you feel about just making sure that projects that are building in Web3 stay true to the ethos of decentralization? And how is Gorki able to do that truly?
And well, I mean, decentralization is critical for the security aspect of
Yeah.
the system because it's kind of a lot of people focus on the consensus algorithm and stuff like that, but what makes a lot of blockchains really secure is the fact that, hopefully there's lots and lots and lots of nodes out there that are are functioning, and it would be then become economically unfavorable to try and attack a network. And so then the problem lies in that is the scalability problem, right? Because then you're kind of having to orchestrate lots and lots of communication, and with lots of nodes comes lots more communication, so the chatter on the network becomes kind of more problematic. Now, some protocols will call that chatter a transaction and then claim that they have a huge transaction value, but that's not something that we're interested in doing. With decentralization, we're hoping to make a really low barrier of entry for the ability to run a validator node. That's kind of one of the key aspects of it. So we hope that there will be a very low barrier of entry for someone who wants to participate in the network. And similarly, one of the things that we've talked about in the past is having potentially lots of different shards that are maybe optimized towards different types of transactions. So you can have a shard that is built with lots and lots of storage, and that can be a shard that is built to handle lots of data. Now, for that to happen, you would probably obviously have to have quite a lot of memory space for your nodes and stuff like that. So that's not for everyone. Might want to optimize a node that is simply built to handle lots of small pieces of data. So for instance, in the IoT space, IoT devices don't move data around typically. In terms of like information about their systems, they chatter to each other, but they don't necessarily kind of send volumes of memory. So you might want a low latency, high frequency shard that can be optimized towards that kind of protocol. So really, we're kind of trying to decentralize the decentralization by adding the ability of the system to kind of have lots and lots of different kind of flavors of itself released into the network, and ultimately that kind of brings a much broader range of adoption, and with that decentralization comes more security.
Right. That's a wonderful way of putting it. Now, to perhaps, my penultimate question, what would be some resources that you would want to perhaps recommend to our listeners who are builders or who are just perhaps curious about Web3? And, these can be resources or thought leaders who you feel you follow as well. And because we've talked about noise, right? There's a lot of noise in this space. At times you need to have to go to the right place to be able to really get the hang of things as well. So are there any recommendations that you would like to give?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do really is to follow people on spaces like Twitter. These projects have to be vocal because they have to tell you what they're doing, and there's a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of people posting some interesting things on Twitter. So and the Agoric guys, I believe, are talking the right talk. I think the Dfinity guys are saying the right things about how they want to achieve and real compute on chain. There's a bunch of people writing books. I spoke recently to a guy called Jamil Hassan who's building some interesting things, and he puts out some interesting content. In terms of advice about stuff, I think just get involved with the technology. A lot of it's open source, and it can be quite easy to pick up. There are lots of really good courses and open source material for things. The easiest one to get into, in my opinion, is Ethereum, because you can just kind of use the Solidity, just build on in your web browser and stuff like that. So it's actually really easy to work with in that sense.
Yeah.
So just begin building dApps and see how it goes, basically.
Yeah, I think that is the right path to take. If you are like really curious and if you're a builder in the space, you have to get your hands dirty, get the right experience to see if the space is for you.
Yeah, definitely.
So now, Alan, I would like to ask you one question that I ask everybody, and you've kind of covered it a little bit with your answers already, but nevertheless, for the optics, I would love to ask you, you were somebody who made a leap from petroleum and into Web3. What would be your advice to somebody who's perhaps in a similar predicament and trying to make a decision about whether they really want to be a part of this Web3 revolution, what would be your advice or the top two things that you would like to say to them so that they can start living on blockchain?
I think building your own skill set is critical. I'm one of these people that kind of is always looking for what am I going to learn next? And I moved from this sort of working in data science and AI, and the open source nature of that world with all the Python libraries and stuff like that is how I found my way into the Web3 world, because effectively it's kind of got this similar ethos. People kind of publish stuff on GitHub, and there's an active debate in a lot of these forums about how things work and should function. That collaborative environment in the data science world and the AI world exists in the Web3 world. So it's kind of about just sort of jumping in and trying to start learning, because through learning you meet people, and as you meet people, you begin to talk about collaborations, and out of these collaborations come projects that often become very successful. So yeah, just kind of meet people, reach out to people. Overall, I find that a lot of the people in the Web3 world are really, really approachable. Even some of the big guys that run the massive funds and have lots and lots of money, you can just send them a message and they will reply. These are lovely people. So they might not be able to offer you funding because you might not be able to convince them that your project's worth it, but they're still great people to speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. People are very open in this space, I think, because the ecosystem is small, perhaps, or because as an industry, we are still in its infancy. I do think that this is something that I give as a suggestion to builders and entrepreneurs as well, that just reach out, and in all probability you'll hear back from them. And I have reached out to folks who were like building huge platforms and that are doing really well when we had just started off, and several years ago, and everybody kind of gets back to you, and they will give you, as you said, if not capital, they will give you at least a response, so you can move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan, for taking out the time to speak to me today. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Any parting thoughts before we wrap this up?
No. Thanks for spending the time to talk to me. It's been really interesting. It's nice to cover a real range of topics. It's good. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Alan, once again. Please take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.